Hello and welcome to This Will Happen. I'm John Jordan. America under attack. These words conjure up visions of movies that were important to my generation, like Red Dawn and other Cold War classics, possibly even some World War II classics. America isn't about to be overrun with foreign troops, and Americans aren't about to be herded into camps and executed in large numbers. That's not going to happen. But America is still under attack, and the attack is just as real, and perhaps more dangerous because of its insidious nature. You see, America is being attacked from within, and in very subtle ways, by a variety of groups, countries, that would like to see American life changed to fit their vision. In the case of the Chinese Communist Party, the Constitution of the United States must be delegitimized. Democracy must be undermined. On the contrary, those in the United States who seek to remake America according to various visions, those that seek to transform the United States or undermine our democracy, have one prime target in common. And that prime target is the Constitution of the United States. These parties see the Constitution as a threat, as a prime barrier to fulfill their vision, with a powerful, if not all-powerful, central government that is not afraid to use the coercive power of the state to achieve its ends. This is a war of ideas, and it's a war that must be won by persuasion and example and using history as our guide. Now, our guest today is somebody who's no stranger to all of you, has been on TV since I was certainly in my teens. This is Colonel Oliver North, who served in the Marine Corps, 2 Bronze Stars and a Silver Star and 2 Purple Hearts. Colonel North served in the National Security Council and has been a host on Fox News and had numerous shows on television, including America's Heroes, and has a new book, The Rifleman, whose topic is very, very relevant to what we're talking about today. America and our constitutional order under attack. With us today is a great American hero, former Colonel Oliver North. 17 years hosted War Stories on Fox and only recently retired from that, but he wasn't done. He's a New York Times best-selling author and came out with a great new book which has enormous topical import for Americans today and where we find our country, called The Rifleman. What happened 200 years ago is very relevant. History may not repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes. Welcome, Colonel North.
Yeah, it's great to be with you, fellow Naval Service. I appreciate the way you brought it in, because the book you mentioned, here's shameless self-promotion right there. The book, right? The Rifleman, right? Which, yeah, make sure I'm not covering up and that, by the way, the book starts out in the midst of a pandemic. Here's the amazing thing of it is, the American Revolution almost failed because of a pandemic. So here's a little bit of the research that I did on this. This is based on CDC data as of today, okay? Confirmed cases of Corona-19, 1.3 million in round numbers here in the US. The second stunner is 77,000 deaths equals 0.02% of the US population. So during the American Revolution, this is the book about the revolution, okay? It's in the midst of a pandemic called smallpox. The US population was just slightly larger than 2.8 million. And the smallpox epidemic in this country, which was only 13 colonies, killed approximately 125,000 Americans, which is roughly 4.5% of the entire population of what was then the United Colonies. By the time George Washington took over the Continental Army, they were dying left and right. And the reality of it, we were still in the midst of a war. And we ultimately won the war in large because the British and the Hessians and the Indians, who were their allies against us, actually had more casualties from smallpox instead, because Washington had started a program that Dr. Benjamin Rush had done, where you would take the pus from somebody who has already got smallpox and rub it into a scratch that was made in the skin, usually on the arm, of one of the soldiers. Now, it's a risk thing to do, because it's not like the kinds of vaccination that we're looking for. In fact, they called it infusion, and it saved the lives of thousands of guys, but it also killed a whole bunch of them as well, because they did contract full-blown smallpox. So I give you that connection because you and I know there's governors now saying that we can't open up our stores, we can't open up our small businesses. And the reality of it is, we had better, or we're going to be in worse shape than the American Revolution left us of our population day.
To what extent is the COVID crisis being weaponized, with divisions being as sharp as they are, by those that would seek to undermine America's constitutional order, and the American public, to a degree, not being aware of it?
Ever since 1973, when Richard Nixon first went to Communist China, we walked away from our allies in Taiwan, and we committed ourselves to doing everything we could to help these poor Chinese, because as soon as they start to have a profitable form of government, then they'll become Democrats, just like us, small d Democrats, right? That didn't happen. It didn't happen in large part because powerful people decided, for example, it was okay if the United States of America sent its supply chain of pharmaceuticals, electronics. But you know the people who aren't in trouble are those in our government who decided years ago that we're going to just deal with these folks because they really aren't that bad. You see, when we were talking in the beginning of this conversation, we talked about the possibility of things being done that would infringe on our constitutional rights. We talked about the First Amendment. How about the Second Amendment? You got whole states where governors, now they're losing the cases, but whole governors were going to say, you can't open a gun store. And the reality of it is, those were all taken to make life a little less free under our Constitution. The sad fact of it is it's a precedent we've never seen before. That's the scary part.
Your book deals with the era where the Constitution was written. As was the case in the Revolutionary War, there's a conflict of visions about what America should be. And even though this war isn't, thankfully, kinetic or military in nature, it's certainly a war of ideas to change American society. And to do so, they need to undermine the constitutional order, with the survival of the Constitution being at stake.
Well, you know, I had a conversation with a dear friend of mine who happens to be the sheriff of Loudoun County, Virginia. What he's been able to do is to start pulling people off the streets and locking them up for breaking the so-called sanitary zone, or by opening up a business that wasn't supposedly on the list yet. And he's not going to get around to doing that until maybe next week after that. And the bottom line of this is that they're expecting this sheriff, by the way, Loudoun County Sheriff is famous all the way back to the Revolution and to the War of 1812. The sheriffs in Loudoun County, and of course what we eventually called the Civil War, which was most uncivil of all. But the reality of it is, he's in a historic position. When the left took over, the first things that they wanted to do was to let the sheriff guard the jail and the courthouse, but we're going to hire a new police department. Well, why is it powerful politicians love police departments? Because powerful politicians depict the chiefs of police. So you find out that in many cases, and you guys have seen this in California, we've seen it all across the country, sheriffs are responsive not to the leadership of the government. They're responsible to the people because they have to be elected. And so when they started talking about this, and you know, the revolution that occurred with the destruction of the two-party system in Virginia last year, the first thing that the new government wanted to do is let's get rid of this sheriff guy and let's get a chief of police that we can control. You see, the threat to our Constitution is that power in the hands of sometimes elected officials. Sometimes it's in the hands of petty criminals, like the mayors of major cities. And so we've seen attacks on the First Amendment. Like you can't go to church. You have to stay outside a church or watch it on TV. Freedom of religion, first of the First Amendments, right? The authority to control people was handed off by their federal government to say, okay, you states, you can set the terms by which people can come and go. The reality of it is they want to take the power, usurp the power that's in the Constitution given in those 10 Bill of Rights.
Watching to see how the American public is going to react to seeing their freedoms taken away, even if they believe it's only temporary. This isn't really being driven by sound public policy. This is being driven by those who might see this as a trial run to see how much they can get away with using the power of government? How much will people take watching to see how the American public reacts in the coming weeks and months?
I stopped on my way in. I picked up a copy of the newspaper for my wife to bring home with me tonight. And I wore this, and I wiped everything down with these. But I wasn't barred from going into the store. The store wasn't barred from letting me come into the store. They set the rules. You've got to have this on when you come in. I have no problem with that. My problem is when somebody says, you can't open your store. You can't allow customers in with that. And I don't care if it's a Republican or a Democrat that did it, it's still wrong. I still think that we need good people to serve. We need good people who understand what you and I did when we raised our hands and took an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And we who care about the future of this country. In my case, grandkids. I don't want my grandkids to have to grow up in a country where they didn't have the same rights, responsibilities, and opportunities you and I have had in our lives. And that to me is one of the reasons why I think it's appropriate for guys like you and me to stand up and say, wait just a doggone minute here. What are we really trying to do? Do you really want the precedent of telling people they can't go to church in America? Do you really want the precedent of a legal official, authority of some kind, saying you cannot open this kind of store in America? And of course, we've got 33 million Americans out of work now. They need to get back to work. Many of them want to go back to work. I don't want that to deny the opportunities for my grandkids. That's what I'm doing.
The next weeks and months will be a pivotal period in American history. This is just going to be so interesting to see when Americans stand up and say, I've looked at the facts, I've had enough, I'm not going to have my rights infringed. Colonel, you are a warrior in every sense of the word. You really are. And tell you what, if you ever run for office again, we'll do everything we can to help you out. Everybody, you want to catch Colonel North's series, American Heroes, it's on YouTube. The Rifleman, pick yourself up a copy. And I hope you understand the importance of what this American hero has been trying to tell us today. That our Constitution is something we all have to defend, or it's something we'll all lose. Thank you, Colonel.
Semper Fi, brother.
Anchors away. Well, we never have all the answers, but here on This Will Happen, we embrace the challenge of looking into an uncertain future, analyzing, parsing events, until we pull out those golden nuggets where we can say, this will happen. Today, we understand that our Constitution is being challenged, if not outright threatened, by those that would seek to remake American society. The COVID virus has presented challenges which we have not run across in our history. It's going to be interesting to see how this turns out and whether Americans are able to look at their liberties being eroded and say, I'm going to care for my neighbors, I'm going to care for my friends, we're going to care for the most vulnerable, but my freedoms, you don't touch those. That I will defend. We're going to learn a lot about ourselves and the importance we put on this document and its 250-year legacy. Are we going to stand up and fight for it? Are we going to challenge those who would take those freedoms away? Remember, this is the place where respect, freedom, and prosperity are for everyone. I'm John Jordan. Thank you.